بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So we are still finishing issue 15, which has come after the general introduction to general statements. So we are still talking about the overall issue of al-am, the general statements, and we will conclude that in tomorrow's lecture. So I decided not to conclude it in today's lecture so we can go nice and slow and make sure that we cover everything properly. So in today's lecture, obviously we're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to talk about non-definite plurals. So we've been talking about the definite article el, like el mu'minun. We know that that's a general statement. But what happens if it's a non-definite plural like rijal, men, or nisa, not el rijal? So we're going to talk about that being not a general statement. We're going to talk about what is the least amount of a plural. The least amount of a plural, as we'll find out, is 3. Obviously, there's a dissenting opinion that says it's 2, but the majority opinion is that there's 3. Well, that's important because it will link to the previous point about the non-definite plural. We're going to also look at can you make a general statement metaphorically, and then we will talk about what happens if there are 2 general statements together. Does one impact the other? Yes or no? If it impacts, when does it impact? Does it impact all the time? And then we are going to talk about incomplete statements, obviously not being generalized because, well, they're incomplete. They're not a full thought. Moving from there, we are going to talk about if you add something to a general statement, is that add-on also general or not? We will look at statements with confirming verbs, including the verb kana. You know, kana Rasulullah such and such. The Prophet used to do such and such. That is a non-general statement. We'll look at why. And then lastly, we will see that the Sharia not asking for specification is considered a general statement. So it's kind of like boom, 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 point by point by point by point, which is why I felt maybe we should just go slow and not fast. Those are the main topics. I might have missed 1 or 2. I'm sure we'll get them in the lecture and in the concluding one. I'll see you back for the beginning of the discussion, inshallah. All right, so we begin the way we normally begin. Bismillah. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Okay, so he says, rahimahullah, picking up the line right where we left off from the last lecture. والأصح أن الجمع المنكر عفوا والأصح أن جمع المنكر ليس بعام. The correct opinion is that a non-definite plural or non-definite plurals are not general statements. So if I said جاء رجال, men came, that in and of itself, the default, the dominant position, the default is that is not a general statement. That's not like saying جاء الرجال, the men came, in which case that is a general statement because of the definite article. We took that in the previous lecture. But if it was a non-definite plural, رجال, نساء, مؤمنون, not المؤمنون, just مؤمنون, non-definite plural, that the default position is that is not a general statement, because you can fulfill that plurality with the minimum amount of plural, which is why that's the next point that he talks about, the minimum amount of plural being 3. So one of the one of the functions of the way that speech works and the way that the general statement works is not everything that is going to be plural is going to be a general statement. Or else it will be kind of very difficult because it will be all over the place where everything is general, 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 general. Well, obviously that's not the case. So وَالْأَصَحُ أَنَّ الْجَمْعَ الْمُنَكَّرَ لَيْسَ بِعَامٍ. The correct opinion is that a non-definite plural are not general statements. Like another example, he says, رَأَيْتُ رِجَالًا. So if I said, what did you see? ماذا رأيت? He said, رأيت رجالا. What did you see? I saw men. So that's not a general statement because obviously you mean something specific. So even kind of when you sort of give these linguistic examples, you kind of see, yeah, well, it's not a general statement because obviously he doesn't mean that he saw all men or all women or all children. He's meaning a subset and you're referring to them as a plural. So what's the minimum amount that can be fulfilled for that plural to be used? In the Arabic language, we say it's 3 because we have the dual form, the muthanna. So the minimum jama is 3. So that's the next thing, if I'm not mistaken, he says, yeah. وَأَنَّ قَلَّ الْجَمْعِ ثَلَاثَةٌ. Also, the least amount of a plural is 3. So if I said to you, oh, how was the party that you attended? Who did you see? I said, oh, were your friends from school there or your classmates there? Like, yeah, I saw friends, أصدقاء, not my friends, أصدقائي, or not الأصدقاء, not the friends. I saw أصدقاء, I saw friends. And there were only 3 people there. So you could say that if there were 3 people there, or if there were 30, or if there were 300. So because of the ability to increase, never ending the amount, in the non-definite plural, we're going to say that it is the minimum amount, which is 3. Of course, he mentions that there's a dissenting view, which I still find odd, but I mean, I got to teach it to you, that some people say, referring to verse Tahrim, verse 4, وَإِن تَتُوبَ إِلَى اللَّهِ فَقَدْ صَغَتْ قُلُوبُكُمَا. But the hadith is referring specifically to our mother Aisha alayhi salam and Hafsa alayhi salam. But the majority responds to that and saying, well, that's just a majaz use, that's just a metaphoric use of the plural. But the minimum plural in the Arabic language is 3. Otherwise, what would be the point of the dual form? What would be the point of the muthanna? What would differentiate the muthanna from the plural, the jama? If the jama could be included, the muthanna can be included in the jama. So I think that makes sense, that the minimum amount is 3. But my opinion doesn't matter. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَأَنَّهُ يَصْدُقُ بِالْوَاحِدِ مَجَازًا. And it also can be used for one metaphorically. So you can use the general, metaphorically, you can make a general statement even if it's just one person. The example that he gives, and I'm just, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to give you the example that he gives, that a man whose wife was not covered in front of another man, he would respond to her, أَتَتَبَرَّجِينَ لِلرِّجَالِ. Do you, tabarruj is, to be uncovered. Do you uncover yourself in front of men? It's actually a very good use because that's actually how people talk. So if, an example that just came to my mind that's maybe more modern and more common. Well, this is common, but more common, in the American idioms, that when you do something, quote unquote, dumb, and your parents tell you, why would you do that? And then you're like, well, Abdullah did it, and your parents say, well, if your friends jump off a bridge, will you jump off a bridge too? They'll use the word friends, they'll use the plural, but there they are specifically referring to one person, but they're making a general statement, majazan, metaphorically. So you can see that, actually his example is good. I mean, because men do talk like that, but you will abstract from the one person and make a general statement metaphorically. So this is actually how language is used even up until today, which I think is pretty cool because one of the things that the faqih or the usuli wants to do is he wants to feel and sense how people are actually living and talking. And to understand that, you need to really be well versed in language. And what I mean by language is not just I know what the words mean or I studied grammar, the usage of language. Language is only really, you only really exercise or display, let's say you only display your knowledge of language when you start to put it together and you start to make sentences. And it's like the difference between somebody who studies a language theoretically, but has never traveled to the country where that language is spoken. So like I had to study German. I actually took intensive German for reading. It was a specific class for graduate students. I took 4 or 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for like, I don't know, like a whole year. And I took a lot of German. So at the end of that, you'd think that I know German. And I went and I talked to my brother and sister-in-law who were German, went to German schools. And I started speaking, and they're like, please don't speak. Don't ever speak German again. That's not how it sounds. So there's a difference between the theoretical, but they go in the summers and they spend the summers in Germany, so their language is accurate. It's the same thing here. So this is very important because when I was preparing, I did not think it was this significant, but as I'm teaching it to you now and recording and looking at the commentary, it is quite a significant point. Okay, so وأنه يصدق بالواحد مجازا, and it can be used for one metaphorically. The general statement can be used for, you can use a general statement but mean one metaphorically in the examples that I just gave you. Hopefully that makes sense, inshallah. Okay. وتعميم عام سيق لغرض ولم يعارضه عام آخر. To make a general statement general when used as praise, this is from the commentary, not from the nas, used from praise, condemnation, or to explain the level of something, it cannot be violated by another general statement. That's a little clunky, but that's actually what he is saying. Okay, so I have a general statement, and this general statement is used for either praise or condemnation. Obviously here he's talking about the Quran. I'll give you an example in a moment. Or to explain the level of something. But when I bring another general statement that is related to this general statement, this second general statement does not violate the generality of the first general statement. It's not a takhsis, it's not a it's not a specifying speech. Sorry, cat caught my tongue. So the example that he gives is in Surah Al-Infitar, verses 13 to 14. إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ لَفِي جَحِيمٍ. Inna, indeed, al-abrar, the innocent people, al-abrar, a plural with a definite article, so it's am, all innocent people are in paradise, are in na'im. And then وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ, indeed all the bad people, fi jahim, are in the hellfire. So these are the two general statements. I'm running out of time. Let me pick it up in the next clip, inshallah. All right, so let me just backtrack just a little bit so we understand where we're coming from. So he's saying to make a general statement general, when used as praise or condemnation or to explain the level of something, it can't be violated or it can't be specified by another general statement. The example that we are going with is in Surah Al-Infitar, verses 13 to 14. إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ لَفِي جَحِيمٍ. إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ, indeed the innocent people are in na'im, are in ease and happiness, which means paradise. And then the second general statement, إِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ, indeed those who are wrongdoers, al-fujjar, a plural that is with the definite article, so that's am, are in jahim, are in the hellfire. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. So here we have general statement A, and general statement from verse A, the first verse A, and then general statement B in the second verse. This one, the second one, does not negate the generality of the first one. That's what he's saying. So I mean, I think kind of when you get the example, in عند المثال تتضح الحال, as I say, when you give the example, then you kind of understand what's going on. So sometimes when you read the text, you're like, what does that even mean? Why is it so clunky? And I apologize that sometimes my translation is clunky. But then when you get the example, اتضح الحال, you kind of see the situation. Now there can be an interaction of a second type of statement to the first general statement. So let me give you that example, which is in Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse 6. I guess it will be 6 and 7. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ. So Allah Ta'ala says praising the believers, and he says one of the characteristics of the believers, and we ask Allah Ta'ala to make us amongst them, are the people who protect their private parts. لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. They protect their faraj, their private parts, meaning they do not engage in any type of illicit sexual behavior, except إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُم, except upon their wives, their spouses, their spouses, and the verse is addressing men, except to their wives and what their right hand possesses. So there is an exception. This is a form of takhsis, a form of specifying the speech. Now, the reason, that's not the example. I'm just explaining the verse. This is the example. إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ, except upon their wives, so any of your spouses, all and any of your spouses, and what your right hand possesses. What your right hand possesses is a general statement. But there is elsewhere in the Quran something that mitigates that when Allah Ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa verses 23, وَأَن تَجْمَعُوا الْبَيْنَ الْأُخْتَيْنِ, and that you cannot conjoin two sisters either in your possession or as your wife. So you can't marry your wife's sister while you're married to your wife. You can't marry two sisters together or have them in your possession. Of course, it's a slavery reference, I understand, and we've talked about that before. So in this case, the second verse, وَأَن تَجْمَعُوا بَيْنَ الْأُخْتَيْنِ, and that you conjoin the two sisters, it doesn't negate the generality of the first one. That's what he's saying. But it is a specifying type of speech, a takhsis, which is when we get to takhsis, the lecture after next, we're in lecture 6, and by lecture 8, 9, and 10, etc., we'll do the specifying speech, takhsis, or al-khas. Those lectures will put together with the lectures that we've been doing up until now, so you'll see how a general speech, remember what we said, the general rule. How do you know that a statement is aam or general? A statement that is general means that it is able to be specified, a takhsis. Takhsis is very important because sometimes people will make a mistake, for example, and say that there is an issue of abrogation, of naskh, but it's not, it's an issue of takhsis. So learning the aam and the khas, what we're talking about now, is super, super important. I mean, it has implications all the time. I can't think of a time when I'm reading something from a legal or usuli point of view or a fatwa point of view, except that you have to consider is it general or is it specific. So I can't really overemphasize the importance of this, which is why I'm going like very snail pace, slow in these lectures, because it's so important. I want to make sure that we kind of get it in. Okay, so he says, rahimahullah, to make a general statement general when used as praise or condemnation or to explain the level of something, it cannot be violated by another general statement. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَتَعْمِيمُ نَحْوِ لَا يَسْتَوُونَ وَلَا أَكَلْتُ وَإِنْ أَكَلْتُ لَا الْمُقْتَضِي. And then he says, rahimahullah, also you can make a generalization through a type of the verse, they are not equal. Here he's quoting chapter 32, verse 18, or the statement, I haven't eaten, and if I eat, and statements that are not complete cannot be generalized. Okay, so those are like 3 examples, so maybe I should have just done them one by one. But let's go back to the beginning. وَالتَّعْمِيمُ نَحْوُ لَا يَسْتَوُونَ وَالتَّعْمِيمُ نَحْوِ لَا يَسْتَوُونَ. So the dominant position, the correct position in our madhab of usul is that we can generalize statements like the verse لا يستوون from Surah Al-Sajdah verse 18 when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says أَفَمَنْ كَانَ مُؤْمِنًا كَمَنْ كَانَ فَاسِقًا لَا يَسْتَوُونَ. Is the person who believes like the person who doesn't believe? You cannot compare them. لَا يَسْتَوُونَ, they're not equal. So لَا يَسْتَوُونَ, here Also, let me give you another verse, Surah Al-Hashr, verse 20. لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. They are not equal, the people, Ashabul Jannah, the people and the friends of Jannah. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us amongst them, and the people of the hellfire. Indeed, the people of paradise are the ones that are victorious. لا يستوون, here, they are not equal, meaning, why is this a general statement? Because here Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is negating every and any kind of comparison. أَفَمَنْ كَانَ مُؤْمِنًا كَمَنْ كَانَ فَاسِقًا? Are the people that believe like the people that don't believe, the disbelievers? لَا يَسْتَوُونَ. They're not equal. Meaning, in general, there's no aspect of their equality. And this is very important because sometimes we are thinking only of the belief point of view. But here, and this kind of goes to, I mean, this maybe we're leaving Usul al Fiqh and going, maybe more towards like tasawwuf, but, all of them, as you've heard me say, these are all instruments playing in the same symphony. Our belief is the engine that regulates and that moves all aspects of our life, and that's why the first hadith of Bukhari is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Indeed, all actions are based on intention, and why Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu said that this is one of the most significant hadith, and it's the first hadith of his madhab, of the first principle of his madhab, rather, as As-Suyuti writes in Al-Ashbah wal-Nadha'ir. And Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu said that this hadith is injected and is part of over 70 chapters of fiqh. So what's an intention? Well, intention is based on belief. So hopefully when I sit and I do all these recordings, I'm intending to teach you and to teach the Quran and the Sunnah, and to carry out the amana that was given to me, the trust that was given to me. I hope, inshallah, and I ask Allah Ta'ala to reward me for it, and to reward you for consuming this material and trying to learn your deen. So that everything that we're doing, now this requires the camera, that I get dressed, that I have the book, that I have the translation, that I have my timer, all of these little components. So here Allah Ta'ala is saying all aspects of the believer. You can't even compare that to the disbeliever. It's not just simply the fact of belief and disbelief. It's all aspects. So that's why it's an aam statement, it's a general statement. And the same thing with the second example, لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. You cannot even compare the people of paradise and the people of hellfire. The people of paradise are the victorious ones. Meaning you can't even, there's no aspects of comparing. So the verse of, or the linguistic construct of لا يستوون, they are not equal, in the Quran and in the hadith literature of the Prophet ﷺ is a general statement. We'll pick it up in the next and final clip, inshallah. All right, so we've been talking about وَتَعْمِيمُ نَحْوِ لَا يَسْتَوُونَ, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. General statements like they are not equal in the Quran. I talked about that. And also he says, and quote, وَلَا أَكَلْتُ, I have not eaten. Or وَإِنْ أَكَلْتُ, or you can say, if I eat. So those two linguistic structures, just as an example, if I said, لا أكلت, I have not eaten, that is a general statement, meaning that I have not eaten or drank anything. I've had nothing to ingest, anything that would violate the fast, let's say. Because the fast is to bring something in from outside to inside. So this would be a general statement. So it's a general statement that negates, that negates every type of food and drink. So if I say to you, have you eaten? You said, I haven't eaten. We usually say, I haven't eaten anything. But you could say, I haven't eaten, or I'm famished, or the like. Those are general statements. Also, you can say, if I eat, and this is the idea behind it is, if I eat, my wife is divorced, that kind of construct, which I find very problematic and I dislike completely. And if I ever hear people say that, I get very upset, because I think, marriage and divorce is not something you play with. But anyway, it's an example because it's an oath, and we use it as an example. If I eat, my wife is divorced, but I found a raisin on the table and I had the raisin. Well, then it's a general statement, so you violated the general statement. Now, in the Shafi'i madhab, we go back to what the niyyah is. What did you really mean by that? I only meant meat, because we're in the days of Eid al-Adha, and I'm talking about meat. That's what we mean. That's the food that we eat in Dhul Hijjah, it's meat. It's the Eid of meat. Some people think like that and they talk like that. And you say, okay, well, it wasn't your intention, so inshallah you didn't violate it. For the Hanafis, it doesn't count. For the Hanafis, there's no mitigating circumstance. If you say that and you have that reason, you've divorced your wife. Anyway, the point is that it's inclusion. This is not a fiqh or a comparative fiqh class. Here we're just trying to understand the usul, that if you said that, if I eat, or if I read a book, or if I grab a book, because you see all the books behind me, and I grabbed any book, but it was a book in Spanish or German, and I had intended only the Arabic book. Well, it's a general statement, so you have to go back and investigate based on which madhab you are about the intention. Okay, and then he said, La al-muqtadi, statements that are incomplete are not generalized. Well, obviously, because they're incomplete. So there's got to be, so the example that he gives is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, رُفِعَ عَنْ أُمَّتِي الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانُ, forgiven or raised or suspended my ummah. The people that are suspended in my ummah are the people that do mistakes and are forgetful. Suspended from what? There has to be something else. It's an incomplete statement, literally from the purely linguistic point of view. Of course, we understand that they are free from sin if you engage in an act by mistake. If you sinned by mistake, you didn't know that I drank something and I didn't know that in it was najasa or in it was alcohol by mistake. There's no sin. Allah Ta'ala is not even, there's nothing for you to make tawbah from because you haven't committed a sin. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. But its inclusion here is to show simply from the linguistic point of view how it's incomplete. In other words, so it can't be general. There's got to be something that mitigates it or specifies it. Okay, let's go move on. وَالْمَعْطُوفِ عَلَى الْعَامِ, that which is joined to the general is not general. The example that he gives is the hadith. This is in Abu Dawood, rahimahullah. لا يقتل مسلم بكافر ولا ذو عهد في عهده. A Muslim is not executed because of a kafir. And there's a difference of opinion in the fiqh, but in our madhab, that's the case. So a non-Muslim, something happening to a non-Muslim being killed or unjustly killed, etc., cannot be the cause of a Muslim dying, because Allah Ta'ala says that He does not give the disbeliever over the believer a right or an edge or something like that, you can say. So this is a legal principle. The Muslim will be punished but cannot be executed for that because of this the nas, the text of this hadith. لا يقتل مسلم بكافر. Okay, that's a general statement, and now we're adding to it ولا ذو عهد في عهده, nor can a person who has a treaty with us be executed because of a kafir. That's a second general statement. But that which is joined to the general statement is not general. So the second statement is meaning the non-combatant, the non-harbi. So if the person has a treaty with us, but then becomes a harbi, becomes a combatant or an enemy of the state, they could be executed. So the second statement is not automatically generalized because of the first general statement. That's what we're talking about. So that which is joined to a general statement is not general. وَالْفِعْلُ الْمُثْبَتِ وَلَوْ مَعَ كَانَ. Also, a confirming verb, even with the verb kana, is not generalized. It's not a general. So if the Prophet ﷺ said, if the hadith says, for example, this is in Bukhari, صَلَّى النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ دَاخِلَ الْكَعْبَةِ. The Prophet ﷺ prayed inside the Kaaba. This is a confirming. It confirms the act. It's not general. It doesn't mean all the time. It was a specific time during the Fath of Mecca, towards the end of the prophetic life, ﷺ. Or the hadith that's narrated by Anas, and this is in also Bukhari. كان النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يجمع بين الصلاتين في السفر. The Prophet ﷺ used to combine his prayers in travel. It's not automatic that every time that he traveled that he did that. Okay, so the verb kana, or a confirming verb in general, does not automatically mean doesn't automatically mean a general statement. وَالْمُعَلَّقِ بِعِلَّةٍ لَفْظًا لكن معنى. Also, a ruling, a hukum, a ruling linked to a ratio legis and illah is not generalized in its phrase, but in its meaning. So we talked about this in a couple of lectures ago about the illah. This is basically, whenever you hear the word illah, you know that we're talking about qiyas. So the example that we gave then and the same example that we give now is alcohol. You know, the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from consuming alcohol, and on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, and then the Prophet ﷺ told us not to drink the alcohol. Khamar, in the language of the Sharia, at the time of the revelation, was specific to date and grape wine. That's what khamar meant. So if we're looking at the technical definition of khamar, it means wine and date alcohol. Today in the Arabic usage, when we say khamr, we mean any type of alcohol, but its usage in the primary sources is that. So any type of intoxicating drink outside of that requires qiyas. So when we engage in qiyas, when we engage in analogy, you know, beer, vodka, bourbon, whiskey, I don't know all that stuff. That's the extent of what I know. Champagne. Obviously, it's universally haram by ittifaq, by consensus. But why is it haram? It is haram because it shares the same ratio legis, the same illah as grape and date wine, which is ethanol, alcohol that causes intoxication. So when we deal with issues of illah, of qiyas, of the ratio legis, that which is generalized is the meaning, not the phrase. So we are looking for the illah. The process of qiyas is to search. You're like a detective. You're searching for the qiyas. You're searching for the illah, for the ratio legis. So it doesn't matter what the thing is called. What matters is the ratio legis, the meaning. So Naha Rasulullah sallallahu an kulli muskirin. You know, the Prophet sallallahu forbade us from every type of intoxicating drink. The meaning of intoxication is what we mean, not necessarily the phrase. Okay, so that's one of the things that what he's trying to say here. And then lastly, he says, وَتَرْكُ الْإِسْتِفْصَالِ يُنَزِّلُ مَنْزِلَةَ الْعُمُومِ. The Sharia not asking for specification is considered a type of general statement. So when a man came into Islam, Ghaylan ibn Salama al-Thaqafi, and he had 10 wives, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, as is narrated in Tirmidhi, أمسك أربعا وفارق سائرهن. Hold 4 and divorce the rest of them. So there is no, this is a general, meaning you can hold any 4 that you choose and then divorce the rest. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. All right. So we actually did a lot today, alhamdulillah. I think it was fruitful, at least I felt it was fruitful for me. So let me go over my notes to give you, a summary of what we talked about. So we're still talking about the general statements. We're under issue 15. Just one more lecture to go until we finish the concept of the general statements. So in today's lecture, we looked at non-definite plurals not being a general statement. We looked at the least amount of a plural being 3. We talked a lot about that and argued against the dissenting view that says it could be 2. We also said that you can use, you can make a general statement metaphorically out of 1. And I talked about the example of, would you jump over the, if all your friends jumped over the bridge, would you jump off of it too? And I kind of said that that's sort of how speech actually is. Then we said that you can make a general statement, when you use a general statement, it cannot be violated by another general statement. So we gave examples of that. And then we talked about the verse, they are not equal, how that's a general statement that negates all types of equality. And then we said that the linguistic structure or the sayings, I haven't eaten or if I eat, we talked about how they are general statements and some of the implications that they might have in divorce cases. And then that incomplete statements are not generalized because they're incomplete. They need something else to complete the meaning. Then we moved from there to talk about that when you join something to a general statement, that joining part is not on default general, could be, but it's not a general statement. So you have to seek out the understanding of that. And we also saw how confirming verbs, even if you use kana, and we gave 2 examples from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are not general statements and cannot be on default interpreted as general statements. Then we looked at the issue of the illah, that the ratio legis in issues of qiyas, what is general is the meaning, not the phrase. So we're like a detective looking for the ratio legis. Wherever we find the illah, that's where the ruling is, so that's why it's general. And then lastly, we said that the Sharia not asking for specification is considered a general statement, like in the man who became Muslim and he had 10 wives, and the Prophet ﷺ said, hold 4 and divorce the rest, meaning that you can divorce whomever, you can hold whomever you want of your wives. Those were the major topics, and then inshallah in tomorrow's lecture, we're going to conclude this section on the am. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.